Hi, I'm Mike Thiente. This video idea is a perfect storm. Mario Kart World releases in 2 weeks as of writing this, and concept art has just come out showing that the developers have thought about giving the game a much more relaxed feel than previous entries in the series, with a greater focus on traveling than racing. Coincidentally, I just played through Night in the Woods, a game which some have described as a walking simulator. Its gameplay consists largely of trotting through a small town and taking in the sights as you interact with its people. I found myself frustrated with the slowness of the main character at first, but I came to realize that, in some games, walking slowly is part of the point. It's far from the first game in which a lack of speed is deliberate, and playing through it, and several other games, made me think about how the pace at which a player is able to move through the game can drastically affect the gameplay experience. So come, walk with me. It's time to take a journey through video game movement. I'm going to start pretty damn close to the beginning. Remember Pong, the game that defined the word arcade in the 70s, and which your parents still can't get enough of? If you haven't heard of it, it's like ping pong on a screen. If you haven't heard of ping pong, your paddle is on one side of the screen, and your opponent's is on the other, each represented by a long white rectangle. A small square, the supposed ball, bounces around the screen, reflected by the walls on the top and bottom, and by the paddles as they make contact. If the ball travels past your paddle, your opponent gets a point, and vice versa. So, you press up and down to... No, actually. They didn't have controllers like that back in the day. In the original arcade version, you used a dial to move your paddle. This pseudo-analog control made the paddle move precisely as much or as little as you wanted it to. I haven't played in a while, but I have had the chance to experience the original game in an arcade before, and it's still a magical time. The graphics and sounds are beautiful in their simplicity. Alas, this is a video only about how the game's movement affects the feeling of its gameplay. It seems easy enough to move the paddle to where the ball is going to be, but when you're in an intense rally, your hands will sweat and you'll slip up just that tiny bit enough to miss your return shot. It's just like real ping pong. The difficulty comes not from hitting the ball back once or twice, but in the focus required to keep going. And while mastery of the highly responsive analog control dial is possible, the gameplay will make even veterans of 50 years slip up once in a while. As a side note, if anyone can find an original Pong game lasting longer than a few minutes, please comment a link because I keep finding ping pong or table tennis rallies when I try to search. The simplicity and beauty, not only in the average American's ability to understand what was happening on the screen, but also in how the game felt to actually play and control, must have been a huge factor in the countless knockoffs and even sequels that plagued arcades and home consoles alike in the years to come, and Pong was to be the gold standard for video game controls until the next decade. I could go on and on about various arcade games and their movement, and there's lots to be said there too, but I don't have the time. I'd like to get this video out before Mario Kart World releases. Speaking of Mario, how about we talk about one of the most notorious and influential games of all time, the original Super Mario Bros. Now, Mario can move at different speeds in this delightful platformer game, but how can you control him without a dial? Nintendo implemented lots of ideas for the red-clad plumber, which are still used in platformers and other genres of games today. Mario's movement doesn't start and stop in a dime. I'm not sure exactly how they did it, and frankly, this isn't an essay about how they programmed physics into games in the 80s, but Mario takes a short, yet noticeable, amount of time to go from a stop to his full walking speed and back. Or his full running speed for that matter. On that note, running! The Nintendo Entertainment System had 2 face buttons, as opposed to most early consoles' single button. Might as well use that B button for something. You can hold it while walking in order to speed up, if you're confident in your ability to complete a level at a breakneck pace, but it does take a bit longer to stop as well. The momentum you get while running also translates to your jumps, so you might need to run, or walk, to leap the perfect distance, and position yourself to make sure you don't accidentally ram into an enemy. Although the game is cited as one in which the player simply decides to run and jump, the decisions of how and when to run and jump make Super Mario Bros. An engaging and challenging experience. Despite having 5 inputs to work with, counting left, right, down, and the 2 face buttons, Nintendo was able to make 32 levels feel distinct from each other because those inputs can be used in vastly different ways depending on the situation at hand. Okay, 32 levels is pretty cool, and Nintendo did make a sequel with even more, and then a bunch of other games with power-ups and worlds far beyond what the NES could do. But again, this isn't meant to be a 7-hour video on Mario's movement alone, unless you want that. For now though, I'm going to jump consoles again. For, back in the day, when there was no such thing as saving the game, and password systems were a precious luxury, for most consoles and literally every arcade game, you'd have to start your playthrough at the very beginning. What if you had to play the first level of your favorite game over and over and over again? How can you make it so that your player won't just get bored? You put the most intense physics system yet into your game and demand that your player learn it. All I have to say is Green Hill Zone, the opening level to the up-and-coming at the time Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. There was no spin dash at the time, so on your first playthrough, you'd be very likely to lose your momentum on a few of the game's upward slopes. With no run button, the game teaches you, nay, forces you, to go back and build up speed. It's like a Rubik's Cube. The best way to go forward isn't always to hold right. Okay, enough about these games where the aim is just to go forward. What if you played a game where you didn't try to win with your movement, but tried to make your opponent lose? Now, I'm talking about the Super Smash Bros. Series, the pioneer of the platform fighter genre. It's half wrestling, half fighting game, half platformer, and all super fun. Despite only owning the one on the 3DS, I've played the other versions with friends and enjoyed just about every second of it. As a casual, the game's chaotic precisely because it's so complex and skill-based. Learning the combos and techs in the game is an adventure in itself, but again, that's a story for another time. Please, if you want me to elaborate on any of these series, comment below. I'm getting excited to make more of these even as I type and read out this script. Back to the series at hand. The main objective of Smash matches is to knock your opponent off the stage with your character's moves. The more you hit your opponent, the more their knockback percentage increases. As the name suggests, the more knockback you have, the farther an opponent's attacks will launch you. Getting hit while at 0% will almost never lead to your doom, but get struck at 100 or 200% with a finishing move, and you're done for. Each attack has its own calculations as well for how much knockback damage it does, and how much it'll increase that knockback percentage. So certain moves are better early on when you're just trying to beat your opponent up, while other moves are better once your opponent's already at a high percentage. However, Smash isn't just about attacking your opponent 100 times and then landing a killing blow. There is a lot of movement tech and strategy in the game. You can aim your attacks in 360 degrees thanks to the analog stick introduced with the Nintendo 64, and with a litany of face and shoulder buttons, players have way more options than they did in the old Mario and Sonic games. Characters even have different moves depending on which direction they're facing. There are so many moves that dashing is now done with the flick of the analog stick. The A and B face buttons are now mapped to different quartets of attacks by default. Be careful you don't press the wrong button. All of these attacks have differing ranges, and certain characters are better overall up close, and others are better at shooting from far away. Knowing the ways different characters match up is huge, because if you don't even know where you're supposed to stand, it won't be long before you aren't standing at all. Even if you do know where you're supposed to be though, it's a matter of actually getting there. Reaching and pressing an advantageous position is something both you and your opponent will be vying to do at the same time, and if you don't have an intricate knowledge of all characters' movement options, you will get tripped up. Speaking of which, while almost every attack is designed in part to shake your opponent around, most skills will move your own character as well. There are attacks you can perform while dashing that'll move you forward, attacks in the air that'll send you straight down, and grappling attacks that might just send both you and your opponent in the same direction. Perhaps the most well-known class of movement-based attacks would be the vertical recovery moves. Almost every character is allowed to jump once in the air, and if you hold the control stick upwards while pressing the specials button, usually the B button, your character will perform a jumping attack that launches themselves and any targets upward. Gaining airtime with such moves can tremendously elongate one's survivability, and any character whose up B doesn't net them any air usually has even more basic jumps to compensate. All of this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the Smash Bros. Series movement options, so I'll stop here for now and just say this series might be the pinnacle of responsive and engaging combat movement in video games. Briefly diving into the concept of 3D games, I'd like to mention The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, specifically the one on the 3DS. The Zelda series is one in which precision is necessary for both combat and puzzle solving, but Ocarina of Time complicated matters by adding a third dimension. To make sure players wouldn't get frustrated by having to think in 3D, Ocarina of Time added a feature called Z-targeting, or L-targeting in the 3DS remake. There's been much debate on whether lock-on mechanics are good or bad for 3D games, but I'm here to say that they actually solved the problem entirely in a way only possible with the 3DS's new technology. You can actually look around and aim ranged weapons with a handheld gyroscope, and it's incredibly fun. I started a new run for the first time in years recently, and I won't deny that I giggle a bit whenever I physically spin around to try to find the answer to a puzzle or snipe an enemy. Gyroscope controls are great for games like this. the Nintendo 3DS even came with a couple of packed-in titles that focus on using the gyroscope in fun ways, Face Raiders and AR games. I can't show off Face Raiders because I don't want to display the pictures of myself or anyone else I've taken over the years, but there is a similar game called Pokemon Dream Radar, which tasks the player with following various Pokemon as they fly around your room and firing beams of energy to subdue them. And AR games uses cards, or mobile apps if you want to cheat, to turn your desk into a fun play space. I mean, I'm not sure if that's more fun than what I can do on my PC, but it was a cute novelty when I was a kid. Gyroscope and AR controls are cool is my point. Okay, enough about games where more movement options is better. Over the past several years, there's been a push for more limitations in games, be they via retro graphics or simpler movesets and mechanics. It's high time to explore how having less movement can be beneficial to the feel of the game. And what better way to do this than with a game whose movement people don't even think about at all? Among Us is a name you're probably surprised to hear in this video, but its movement system is honestly genius. You can move in 360 degrees throughout the ship, and your movement's just fast enough that you can slip away from someone following you if they mess up, but not so much that you can juke people on your own. Why would you want to lose people? Well, in Among Us, you're randomly assigned to be either a crewmate who can't move at all while doing tasks that help the ship stay afloat, or an imposter whose goal is to kill all the crewmates and remain undetected. As an imposter, you're able to dim the lights to reduce crewmates' visibility and even cause critical ship failures that'll lead to an instant loss if not tended to, forcing crewmates to take detours and waste time fixing additional problems. These moments of distress can be great opportunities to land a sneaky kill, which often comes with a significant cooldown. And if nobody sees the body or makes a spontaneous emergency report, no one will even know you've committed a murder. Because of the moderate speed at which characters move, everyone's relative positions can make for huge clues in proving who's innocent and who is sus during the meetings. Also of note, after an emergency meeting or dead body report, everyone starts off again in the cafeteria, which could be good or bad for the crewmates or imposter alike. Crewmates have to split up to perform tasks, and the imposter has to get into position to strike again. If characters move too slowly, the game would get boring, and if characters move too quickly, solving the game would become more difficult and almost meaningless. As it is now, there's a great balance between crewmates trying to finish tasks and getting just enough information to suss out the imposters, and their enemies being able to cause chaos and pin the blame for the crewmates' deaths on each other. Slowing things down even more, we have Night in the Woods. It looks like a platformer at first glance, but it's really more of a visual novel. You play as Mae Borowski, a college dropout who moves back into her small town of Possum Springs. The majority of the game is spent talking with friends and neighbors, and you're not meant to go fast. Even if you make a beeline from one end of town to another, you'll be spending minutes holding the control stick down in the same direction. It's easy to get bored if you're just looking to complete the game. To get the most out of an experience like this, you have to be willing to engage with the townsfolk and explore the game space, communicating with side characters to learn more about them and about Mae herself. When Mae is out with friends, her movement is often further restricted, giving character to her friends and implicitly showing Mae's respectful side. The mature Bee, for example, only walks in most of her scenes, while the rebellious Greg is more than happy to run along with Mae. Small details make up the bulk of Night in the Woods' experience, and being able to sprint past it would go against the very point the game tries to make. The epitome of limited controls games, however, are rage games. QWOP, Getting Over It, and many more have the explicit goal of frustrating the player with awkward and unusual control schemes, which few players can come to terms with, let alone master. If you've ever seen speedruns of these kinds of games, you know what I'm talking about. Most video games are about using the controls to your advantage in order to beat the levels, but in titles like these, the controls themselves are your greatest enemy. I wish I had more to say, but the closest thing to a controls-based rage game I've played at length is Human Fall Flat, a physics-based platformer that's just janky enough to distract from finding the solutions to otherwise simple puzzles. You don't just have to realize that you need to get a box to hold a switch down. You have to figure out how you'll jump onto the platform to get the box, and then execute that plan, while the knowledge that failure will cost you minutes of your time threatens to stress you out just enough to lose your focus and make you fall to your doom, but not enough to make you actually quit the game. That is until you have to drive a truck full of coal. I know that I've barely scratched the surface, but there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of games that have shaken up the way that we perceive movement in this medium. If you've watched this far and want to discuss stuff like this with me and a bunch of other people, you can also join my Discord server with the link in the description. Whatever you do, and whatever games you like to play, if you even play video games, I hope that I've at least given you a small sense of appreciation for the movement systems they contain, if not for game design as a whole.